You've probably heard the story of Stephen, right? The first Christian martyr. He gives this powerful speech, and for his trouble, he gets stoned to death. But what if there's more to it? What if the real reason he died wasn't just a general statement of faith, but a very specific coded message he hid inside what sounded like a boring history lesson? A message that his audience understood instantly, and that was so explosive it cost him his life on the spot.
I mean, really think about that for a second. How does a history lesson get you killed? A man is on trial. He stands up and recounts the history of his own people, to his own people, and their immediate gut reaction is to drag him outside and kill him. Something is definitely going on under the surface here. So let's dig in and figure out what he was really saying.
The timeline is just brutally simple. First, Stephen gets picked as a leader in the early church. Then, he's arrested on completely bogus charges. He gives one single speech to defend himself, and that speech directly leads to his execution. The speech is the trigger. Our job is to figure out why. Okay, so let's start with the speech itself. Part 1, a deadly history lesson. We're about to look at what, on the surface, might just be the most dangerous speech in the entire Bible. You gotta picture the scene. This isn't some sermon on a street corner. Stephen is on trial for his life, standing before the Sanhedrin. This is the supreme court of the Jewish people. The stakes just could not be any higher. He's there answering charges that he's been blaspheming against the law of Moses and the temple itself. The whole thing kicks off with a very formal question from the high priest himself. Are these things so? Basically, are you guilty of what they're accusing you of? This is Stephen's one and only shot to defend himself. And his response is, well, it's kind of weird. He doesn't really give a yes or no. Instead, he launches into this long, sprawling recap of Israel's greatest hits. Starts with Abraham, goes through Joseph, Moses, the golden calf, the whole 40 years in the desert. It sounds like a Sunday school lesson that every single person in that room already knew by heart. Which brings us right back to that central mystery. Why was this so offensive? If he's just retelling their most beloved stories, why did it make them fly into a murderous rage? The answer isn't just in the stories he told, but in the devastating theological argument he was building with them, piece by piece. Now, to really get that argument, we have to do something a little counterintuitive. We have to rewind, just a bit, to the chapter right before the speech. So let's jump into part 2, cracks in the story. We're going to look at some clues in Acts chapter 6 that most people just read right over, but they set the stage for everything. So in the list of the new leaders chosen along with Stephen, the author, Luke drops 2 tiny little details that are actually huge, blinking neon signs. First, there's a guy named Nicolaus, and Luke makes sure to tell us he's a convert from Antioch. And second, the apostles perform this ritual of laying on of hands. Let's start with Nicholas. Why is he so important? Well, he's not an ethnic Jew, he's a convert. And he's not from Judea, he's from Antioch, a major Gentile city. Luke is basically giving us a massive heads up. He's signaling that the mission of the church is already breaking out of its Jewish container. It's expanding to the rest of the world, to the nations. And what about that laying on of hands? That is way more than just a formal blessing like a pat on the back. It is a direct, official endorsement from the apostles. It connects Stephen and these new leaders to the power that was poured out at Pentecost. And remember, that power was given for one specific reason, to take the message of Jesus to all the nations of the world. This is the mission getting its official green light. Okay, so with this global mission in the back of our minds, we can finally unlock what Stephen was doing. This brings us to part 3, Israel's great betrayal. Stephen is about to build his case against the leaders of Israel based on a shared theology, a worldview that everyone in that room would have known inside and out. It's often called the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. First, we gotta get this term down, the host of heaven. In the Old Testament, this refers to the divine beings, sometimes called the sons of God, that God put in charge of the pagan nations after he scattered humanity at the Tower of Babel. So here's how that worldview unfolds, in 3 simple steps. 1. At the Tower of Babel, God basically disinherits the rebellious nations of the world. 2. He hands them over to the authority of these lesser divine beings, the host of heaven. And 3. God starts over from scratch. He calls Abraham to create a brand new people just for himself, Israel. They would be his personal portion on the earth. And this is where Stephen takes their own theology and turns it on them like a weapon.
Right after he tells the story of the golden calf, he says, "But God turned away and gave them," and he means Israel, "over to worship the host of heaven." This was an absolutely mind-blowing accusation. He was saying Israel had committed the ultimate sin of the pagans, essentially putting themselves in the same category as the disinherited nations.
And for his proof, Stephen quotes the prophet Amos. But if you look closely, you might notice something weird. The Greek version he quotes is a little different from the original Hebrew text. The names of the foreign gods are different, Moloch and Raphan versus Sikkuth and Kian, and the place of exile is different too, Babylon versus Damascus. So what's going on? Did Stephen get it wrong? Well, no, because while the little details are different, the main point, the theological punchline, is exactly the same. In both versions, the charge is apostasy. Israel betrayed their one true God for foreign idols and was punished for it with exile. Stephen's point was devastatingly clear. It doesn't matter which version of the text you use. The story of our people is a story of rebellion and judgment.
And that crushing indictment leads directly to the climax of the entire story. Let's move to part 4. The king is reigning. This is the final vision that sealed Stephen's fate.
After he's finished his historical takedown, Stephen looks up to heaven and delivers the final fatal blow. He says, "Behold, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." For his accusers, that was it. That was the point of no return. Now you have to understand, Son of Man was not just some generic title. Every single person in that room knew exactly where it came from. A famous world-changing prophecy in Daniel chapter 7. It describes this divine figure who, at the very end of time, would come before God's throne and be given an everlasting global kingdom. But here is the fatal twist. In Daniel's prophecy, the Son of Man is approaching the throne. It's something that's going to happen in the future. But in Stephen's vision, Jesus, the Son of Man, isn't approaching. He's not waiting. He is already standing at the right hand of God, the ultimate position of power, and he's exercising that authority right now. So let's get to our final section and unpack the absolutely incredible implication of that one little detail. Part 5, already but not yet, and the beginning of the kingdom of God. What Stephen declared with his final words was that the long-awaited kingdom of God wasn't some distant future event anymore. It had already started. Jesus wasn't a king in waiting. He was a king who was already enthroned and reigning from heaven. This is that core Christian idea of the kingdom. It is already here in power, even while we're waiting for it to be not yet fully realized here on earth. And that is the hidden message that got Stephen killed. It completely reframed their entire national hope, their temple, their identity. It was a declaration that a new age had dawned. And it leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. If the kingdom has already begun, what does that change for us?